So the topic of tonight's talk and discussion is climate, food and planet, and why what we eat matters. So as a district council, we're really keen to hear what we can all do to reduce our carbon footprint. We have our own Destination Zero climate action plan, and certainly as a green group of the district council, we're really keen to explore opportunities to accelerate reducing emissions across the district, both within our own operations, but also working with communities and households across the district. Now, before I invite Jonathan to the stage, I'm just going to spend 5 minutes going through a few slides. Jonathan will then talk for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but there will be plenty of opportunities for a discussion at the end of Jonathan's speech. So we'd really be keen to hear your views as to what we can do, and obviously pose any questions that you may all have to Jonathan. We aim to finish at about 8:30. So I'm certainly convinced that food is one of the most powerful levers to address key challenges of our time, whether that's climate change, the biodiversity crisis, health or poverty. And what we eat matters. The food that we eat 3 times a day really does matter and impacts on both human and planetary health. Many of you will have seen this rather scary looking graph. 2023 has been confirmed as the warmest year on record. It shows the global average temperature over the last 63 years, and the red line represents 2023. Each month since June 2023 has seen new temperature highs, and the world sea surface is the hottest on record, and while the Antarctic ice sheet is at its extreme low. And even last month, just in February, was the warmest February in modern times. So I think we all understand we're really confronting a climate crisis. Whilst many of us will associate the release of greenhouse gas emissions, with emissions from our homes, our energy infrastructure, our cars, maybe our food system, the way we grow, distribute and consume food, is perhaps sometimes less on the radar, but is actually equally as important. Some 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions originate from our food system. Around 70% of food emissions in 2015 came from agriculture and associated land use. So, for example, deforestation in South America. The rest stem from retail, transport, consumption, waste, packaging, etc. Just a few facts. According to WWF, 70% of biodiversity lost globally is attributed to food production. The way we produce and consume food has been identified the biggest single threat to nature. This slide obviously shows deforestation in Indonesia, often, for example, driven by our appetite for palm oil, which is found in many thousands of food goods, cosmetics, etc. 78% of freshwater pollution is caused by agriculture. This pea super of a river is one that many of us in this area will be very familiar with. It's probably one of the most beautiful rivers in the UK. This is the River Wye, just up the road from us. Over the last 5 to 10 years, it suffered from significant pollution as a result of, particularly I think, industrial chicken farming. So basically chicken shit going into the river is causing these scenes. 1/3 of all food lost globally, 1/3 of all food produced globally is wasted. And that's an inherently inefficient waste of resources. It contributes to climate change, it drives biodiversity loss, and actually in Worcestershire, the average household wastes about £65 worth of food a month. We certainly think at a district council level this is something that we can really try to tackle, and we hope to do so in the next couple of years. Food not just impacts on planetary health, it has a significant impact on our own health. We have nearly 1 billion people suffering from hunger or malnutrition. Perversely, some 2 billion people suffering from overweight or obesity. That's a huge burden on our National Health Service, for example, costing us billions each year. Treating obesity, diabetes costs more than the money we spend on police, fire service, judicial system, for example. And food also shapes our landscapes in both positive and negative ways. We live in a beautiful part of the world. Malvern Hills are shaped by the farming landscape. More extensive grazing helps support biodiversity on the hills, but at the same time industrial intensive agriculture rips away hedgerows and woodlands. I just wanted to kind of introduce you to some of the kind of issues, but these, I believe, are issues that are inherently solvable. I've asked Jonathan to give us a little bit of flavour of his views in terms of what government can do, what district council can do, and what we can all do as citizens and consumers of food. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Jonathan to the stage. Jonathan is an eminent writer and campaigner on sustainable development. For the last 30 years, he's provided strategic advice to leading UK and international companies to deepen their understanding of today's converging environmental and climate crises. In 1996, he founded Forum for the Future, where I used to work a good few years ago, which is a leading international sustainable development charity working with business and civil society to accelerate a shift to a sustainable future. Jonathan was formerly co-chair of the Green Party and knows Malvern quite well, and director of Friends of the Earth. He also stood as chair of the UK Sustainable Development Commission in 2009, after 9 years of providing high-level advice to government ministers. He was awarded a CBE in 2000 for his services to environmental protection, and his latest book, Hope in Hell, is a powerful call to action on the climate emergency. So without further ado, I'd like you to give a warm welcome to Jonathan. Jonathan,
Well, thank you, Mark, for covering off all the really difficult bits and getting some of those statistics out of the way. My brain holds statistics on a very episodic basis. Something may stick in my brain for a little bit, but I find it disappears quite quickly unless it's really, really salient to what I'm trying to share with people. But this is quite a daunting topic. Do you think we could get rid of that? It's a bit odd, isn't it? Should we look at here? Probably taken about 50 years ago. Yeah, this whole story about food and where it fits in this interlocking set of systems, global systems today, is massively important, as Mark said. And we are coming to terms now with the degree to which we have to be much more applied when we think about the implications of our food system, production and consumption, as it relates to climate, biodiversity, the economy, equity, a whole host of different issues. And it's a little bit difficult when you listen to the debate now, because the debate is almost entirely about decarbonisation through energy systems and manufacturing and all the rest of it, and only secondarily, oh brilliant, thank you so much, does it reconnect us to the whole notion of not just farming, but land use in general, including forestry, as well as the actual food production side of things. So we do need to be much more applied to that, and I hope that this evening we can have a good conversation about that. It is delightful to be back in Malvern. I've been here many times. My wife comes from Malvern, so and my mother-in-law lived here all her life, so I know this town very well. Some of you may not know that Malvern was once the go-to favourite conference centre for the Ecology Party back in the 1980s. We went either to Bridlington, which was lovely but bracing, or we would come to Malvern, and Malvern was our favourite place. The Ecology Party conferences were a bit smaller in those days than they are today. Green Party conferences are today. But it was lovely coming here. It was always wonderful. We'd have crazy outings onto the hills, obviously, throughout the time. And I do have a very strong memory of being in that hall in the main theatre complex, which of course is now super duper done up and everything. But in one of the halls there's a great, I don't know if it's still there, it may have been removed because it's been so improved, but it's Levavi oculos meos ad montes. Is it still there? I shall lift up my eyes unto the hills. And for a Green Party conference, the Ecology Party conference, this was very appropriate. And in extremis, we would refer to the need to look to the hills, because at that time we were so small, it was difficult to look anywhere else. So, it's great to be back, and I hope that this evening we'll have a good conversation and discussion about things. The reason why food is so important is obviously because it unlocks so many of the answers to the problems that we face today. We live in an extraordinarily complex, intricately set of connected systems. And it's sometimes very difficult for people to see the way in which all of those systems interact with each other. But if you start with just the basics of food, and you work out from the food that we buy and eat as individuals, you work from that out to the much bigger global picture about food systems at that level, you essentially take in the whole of what humankind's enterprise is about on this planet. It is remarkable if you start at that level. So we do have to start at the personal level. We do have to be mindful of personal responsibility. We do need to recognize the fact that what we put in our bodies has a marked impact on our own health. And we know the evidence about that has been accumulating over many, many years. That evidence is now pretty devastating. You saw from the statistics that Mark shared the degree to which now globally huge numbers of people are affected by poor diets in one form or another. And what we're beginning to understand is that is part of the food system. So I don't know how many follow the whole debate about what is called ultra-processed food. But it's only in the last 10 years that scientists have woken up to the fact that the impact on our health comes not just from the raw materials involved in the food that we're eating, but it comes from the way in which those materials are then treated and processed. And the combination of those two things, either good or bad raw materials or good or bad processing, actually has this dramatic effect on the ways in which our bodies are impacted, our whole natural health systems are impacted. Astonishing report, just 2 weeks ago, from a number of universities around the world, including Johns Hopkins in the USA as the leading source here, showing the linkage between ultra-processed food and 32 different negative health impacts on people around the world. I followed this debate very carefully because many of the companies that we worked with in Forum for the Future had an interest in some of these complex food issues. And I have to say, even the best of them fought furiously against the notion that the way in which food is processed could have such a marked impact on individuals and collective health systems. But that data gets stronger and stronger all the time. And of course, there is an absolutely astonishing connection between that and social equity. Because food systems are not neutral when it comes to the impact on different parts of society. Depending on where you may live, what your income level might be, what your opportunities are to purchase good, healthy food or not, you will see this incredible correlation between where people live and their income levels and the kind of food that they are buying. And again, another study was published last week, in fact, from Cambridge University, showing an absolute correlation between the places where people live and the access to food outlets that they have in those communities. And to put it bluntly, the poorer the community, the more shit they're eating. Cambridge did phrase that a little bit more elegantly, I have to say. But they went all the way from Kensington. Not only did they not maintain that same level of funding, it has taken all of this time to get even remotely close to introducing the kind of support mechanisms for farmers, which would make it possible for them to do what most of them want to do, which is to be involved in producing the food that the country needs while simultaneously protecting the natural resources, the environment, biodiversity, and doing it all in a, quotes, climate-friendly way. We've had so many secretaries of state in DEFRA in the last few years. They come and they go, they look at this stuff, they're baffled by it, they're not particularly interested. Going to DEFRA is usually a mark of political failure. Oh my God, I'm on my way out. Where have they sent me now? Oh Lordy, Secretary of State of DEFRA, God. Predecessor, Therese Coffey. Oh no, I'm finished, that's it. My career is gone. And it's a kind of black hole when it comes to doing what needs to be done for farmers. It really is. So for me, it's a very clear story here. If you go on abusing the trust that farmers might have in good governance and good policy making to shift things over time towards allowing farmers to produce the food that we need in ways that are compatible with biodiversity, climate, and good, healthy diets, if you don't gear your system to that, do not be surprised when farmers turn around and say, we've had it. We're just pissed off to hear. And of course, that creates the most fertile territory for extremist groups to come in with their wretched AstroTurf campaigns, claim that they're operating in the interests of the farmers when actually they're not. They're often a front, either for commercial interests or for very deep, dark, right-wing political interests. And that, I'm sorry to tell you, is what is happening around the whole of Europe right now. What we've seen here in the UK so far with demonstrations from the farming community, with the active support, of course, of our Prime Minister, who was only too happy to appear on a pitch invasion, as it were. So a bunch of farmers in Wales who decided to block a road, and who turned up, standing right next to them? Our Prime Minister, saying, yes, we really want to support farmers here in the UK, and particularly Wales. Now, if you were doing the same kind of thing to raise your concern and your voice about climate, you'd be banged up. You'd be arrested, prosecuted, and possibly sent to prison. The Prime Minister apparently thinks it's perfectly okay to stand alongside a group of farmers who have been abused intellectually and persuaded that their best bet now is to throw in their lot with a bunch of manipulative right-wing ideologues who will take them for as long as they can while they serve their own political purposes. Don't underestimate this. If you look at what is happening in the Netherlands, for instance, what's happening in France, in Italy, and elsewhere, this is a very dangerous force in our lives, and we may want to talk a little bit more about that. So, trust building becomes critical. We know we have to do more of this, and the thing that I wanted to mention, Mark, with the thinking about the district council here, is you can't do this trust building at the national level any longer. All of the campaigns I was involved in were based on an assumption that there was still room to do this coalition building, trust building at the national level. That's gone. It's completely gone. There's no point launching a campaign about that now. But at the local level, it is still difficult, but perfectly possible to think about ways in which proactive, enlightened local councils, district councils, can think about their convening power to bring land managers and farmers together with health, climate and biodiversity campaigns to start working out what the real long-term solutions would look like for a particular district, a particular area. And I do think, thinking of the way in which your district council, Mark, with 7 Green Party councillors now, I don't think we had 7 councillors in the entire party the last time I was here in Melbourne for an Ecology Party conference, so there you are, there's progress. It is perfectly possible to think of what it would look like to bring that kind of coalition together. So that's almost the end of what I want to say. Just one last reminder about the urgency that lies behind this. So Mark talked a bit, he showed me the slide about average ocean temperatures over 2023 and on into 2024, described by one of the most conservative climate scientists in the USA. I mean conservative as in very moderate in the language that he uses. A wonderful guy called Zeke Housefather, which is such a good name. I go straight to his tweets because I know he's going to be spot on. He described these climate impacts in 2023 as absolutely gobsmackingly bananas. Not the kind of language you would normally expect from a middle of the road, very modest, restrained climate scientists. And that, of course, has pushed on into 2024. Yesterday, we had the news from the Copernicus Climate Services team, which is the EU's principal source of climate-related data and has become one of the most prestigious organizations globally. Copernicus reported that February was not just the warmest month ever. The parties just over 2 years ago, where politicians from all around the world said it is our preeminent duty to do everything we can to ensure that the average temperature increase before the end of the century does not exceed 1.5 degrees centigrade. 1.77. Now, a word of caution, important to get this right. You can read all about it in my latest blog if you're interested, because I've really dug into this in some kind of detail. This is a crazy time anyway, because it's one of those El Nino years, and the last time that we had a strong and El Nino effect as this, so we get this variation between La Nina, cooler, El Nino, hotter. I have no climate scientists picking me up on this tonight, but that's basically it. The last time we had an El Nino as strong as this was back in 2016. Was the previous hottest year before 2023. So we know that an El Nino effect makes things worse in the short term. But I can tell you this because I have been asking a lot of people, was there one single scientist who anticipated that even if it's only for a short period of time, we would see an increase of 1.77 in 2023-2024. And the only one who probably wouldn't have spelled it out as specifically as that was Jim Hansen, the first scientist ever to present data about accelerating climate change back in 1988 to the US Congress, and still going strong today. So look, this is running away with us. And we're contemplating now a kind of level of disruption which beggars belief. And here's the ultimate irony for farmers, land managers today. That disruption is going to devastate their lives as farmers and food producers all around the world. It'll manifest in all sorts of different ways, depending on what the climate impacts are in different parts of the world. For some, it'll be flood-related. For others, it'll be because of increasingly violent storms of one kind or another. For others, it'll be drought. We know what that feels like here in the UK for farmers. October, November, December, wettest months that they've suffered for a long time. January was a bit nicer to them. The rain let up for a bit, and then February whacked them around the head all over again. So here are farmers happily signing up to climate-denying, extremist, radical groups. No farmers, no food. Because they're worried that net zero is going to put them out of business. Whilst probably in their heart of hearts understanding that the thing that's going to put them out of business is accelerating climate change. So these are intense times. The politics of this is very acute. We have to get it right. We have to be prepared to understand where other people are coming from, to be prepared to step into their shoes, to understand their frustrations, to speak their language to a certain extent. And we have to put that at the heart of what we're trying to do now, to build different constituencies of progressive action for a better future. Mark, I forgot to check the time, but I think I've probably now it's overrun, but that's okay. Sorry, it's always a little bit of a... I write it all down, obviously, to start with, but then it kind of follows a logic order. So, did I miss out anything? It doesn't matter, it's too late. We'll do all of that in Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Very thought-provoking, as usual.